Thank you for joining us for this week's live Q&A. We're discussing how to harvest different flavours of honey from your Flowhive. When my father and I were inventing the Flowhive, one thing we really didn't expect was to create a harvesting system that allows you to isolate different flavours frame by frame. And it's become an amazing benefit of harvesting honey in this new way with our Flowhive invention. Because each frame can be tapped to an individual jar or a whole lot of little jars if you like. That means you've got just the honey that the bees were creating when they were filling that frame going to that jar. And what flowers they're visiting will determine what the flavour, what the colour and the properties of honey will be. So for instance, this one here is the privet honey, which flowered earlier in spring. And this one over here, which is darker, is the paperbark honey, which actually comes anywhere from autumn right through to spring. So in our winter we often get these tones, and it's just an amazing thing to be able to harvest different flavours and to isolate them. As a conventional beekeeper, there wasn't a really useful way to be able to do that. So what we would always do is harvest not only all the frames out of one hive and mix it all together in the extractor. We would harvest maybe 20 beehives or 20 of these boxes at once, mix it all together, and we'd still get a nice honey, but not as nice as having all the different flavours. So in order to harvest the different flavours from your hive, all you need to do is make sure you're not mixing it all together in the actual, like if you harvest them all into a bucket, that would mean you'd be mixing them together. So let's try this frame here. Looks like it's got a nice light honey in it. Let's see. It sometimes can be surprising because perhaps they switch flowers when they're filling the last cell lines. So you don't really know until you give it a go. Now, let's try another one up here and see what the flavour difference will be between the two. So all I'm going to do is insert this key, give it a turn, and what that'll do is create the channels inside the comb. If I wanted to harvest a little bit, I could insert the key just part way. If I wanted to harvest a lot, you can go all the way like that. Turn it to a 90, and what's happening now, and you'll see it starting to happen here, is the honey is draining down each line of cells as channels are formed inside the comb by our Flowhive invention. And so here we go, it's starting to stream out now, and that pace will pick up, and you can see this cell line here is a cross section. Basically what's happening here is the same as what's happening all the way through the frame. And I can tell already that it wasn't a monofloral honey when they filled this frame. It was a mix of flowers, because I can see a little bit of streaking. Sometimes you will get it monofloral, where you see just one type of honey in the jar. Sometimes it's a little bit of a mix, but even so, the flavours will be different frame by frame, and that's become a major benefit. And I can also see there's some medicinal properties from the leptospermins here. If you see the little jelly-like globules coming down, so different properties as well. So when the bees have been foraging on Australia's manuka, the leptospermin trees, that means you get that antimicrobial, antibacterial, medicinal honey. It's good if you've got a sore throat. It has amazing claims for healing wounds that antibiotics can't touch. So we've got a little bit of medicinal honey in there too today. If I go along and harvest this next frame, just by repeating the process, we'll see what's in there. Okay, let's see what we've got. Super light. And we'll be able to compare the two. Look at that. So see the colour difference as well. If you've got questions, put it in the comments. Wow, that's really different. Look at that. streaming out. Now, this frame, I actually just muddled it up, and we're harvesting a frame I already harvested a week ago, and that's why it was very easy to turn the key and there's not much honey in it, but still interesting to see what flavour's coming in right now. One thing you can do is just harvest a couple of cell lines at the end if you really want to get an idea of what is flowering now and what the flavour is. Any questions coming in?
Yes, Seeds, what's the difference when you're harvesting with a traditional hive like a Langstroth compared to a Flowhive?
Okay, so the main difference is we have the extraction system, if you like, built right into the hive. So you no longer need a shed full of equipment or a laundry full of equipment, being your decapping bench where you get your frames out of your hive, you take it back to the laundry, you cut the capping off each frame with a heated knife, then that frame goes into a centrifuge and you repeat the process to every frame you've taken out of a conventional super, and then it's spun at high speed. It's like a washing machine, if you like, spinning at high speed. All the honey goes out to the edges of the stainless steel extractor and flows down and builds up at the bottom. So you're mixing all of those honeys together. You've got a lot of work to get all the frames out of all the hives back to your processing plant. You've got a lot of equipment to buy and maintain. So we came along and went, hang on, why don't we just tap the honey straight out of the hive while the bees are able just to do their thing. And after a decade of work, we were able to bring that to the world, and that's our Flowhive invention, the flow frames here that allow you simply to tap the honey straight out of the hive in an easy way like this. And it created quite a stir in the world because it was so different. There hadn't really been any changes to honey extracting since Langstroth in the 1850s. So 150 years, it kind of stayed the same. And we came along and said, hey, how about you skip all of that and just tap the honey directly from the hive? And there's multiple benefits to that. And one we're talking about today is being able to isolate different flavours, because when the bees were filling this one, they were visiting different flowers to when they were filling this one. And we've lost the nice clear view there, so I didn't get a good visual on how full the frame was. The frame actually needs a clean to get that back. So what we're going to do is go along and harvest this next frame, which I can see is full because you can see the capping they're putting on the frame down the side. If you muddle it up, no big deal. You might just get honey that's a little too liquid, and that will simply mean that you might have a higher moisture content, and you'll need to consume that honey quicker or it may ferment. Look at that gorgeous honey just pouring out. Any questions coming in?
Yes, I've got a question asking, what's your favourite flavour of honey, and what season is that flower blooming that you like?
Okay, so we get a lot of the darker honeys around here actually through winter, and the more, I guess, unique flavours come in the springtime, where you've got amazing, really high floral note bursts in the honey, and that comes from the wild quince, which flowers here. It's not everyone's favourite honey, but it's one of my favourites because it's so bright and so floral. But more than anything, I enjoy having different flavours to taste test between, and it's great to bring that story to the table. People really enjoy tasting all of your different flavours, and it brings about a lot of conversation about how the bees actually make honey and so on. And I actually appreciate having some honeys that are way out there in flavour, really strong, really bitter, or simply don't taste good at all. And you throw them into the tasting, and it's just amazing the look on people's faces when you're doing a nice taste testing of honey. Now, if we went through these jars, you'd have a multi-tone, as in malt, being a dark malty flavour compared to a bright floral one here with the springtime with the privet and this one here. It looks like the the wild quince. Beautiful.
Right, so we always get asked this one, that when you're harvesting honey and you're opening up those frames, is it hurting the bees?
Okay, so my father and I put a lot of effort into that, where we really wanted to make this a much better way of harvesting, and to us that meant one where the bees were less disturbed and less damaged by the harvesting process. That was one of the things. Like I kept pretty wild bees, and I'd be harvesting say 40 hives of honey. You'd spend days and days just pulling out the frames, taking them to the truck, putting them on, and what I found is you'd be walking over bees that are going everywhere, squashing a whole lot, and the whole process was quite disruptive to the bees, and it was pretty hard to do it in any kind of hurry to make it efficient without rolling bees as you pull out frames and so on. So one of the main goals was, how can we gently harvest honey and leave the bees be? So we succeeded in making it much more gentle for the bees. If you look in the window here, you'll see they've hardly noticed what's going on. That's very different compared to pulling the hive apart in the conventional way and trying to pull all the frames out in a hurry. If you're a conventional beekeeper, you know what I'm talking about. You get used to squashing bees, and the bees have a quick turnover, so you don't worry too much, and there's nothing much you can do about it. But what we did is, let's try and make it a minimal disturbance. So one of the key things we did was we made moving parts inside the comb, and they shift like this, and the honey flows down zigzagging channels into the trough at the bottom. Now, some of our earlier prototypes had the parts meeting, which didn't matter when you were harvesting like that if some bees were in the cells, because you can't always guarantee that all of the capping is on. Ideally, all of the capping is on the frame, but sometimes you are harvesting when there is some bees still working down the cells. So, does that, they were fine, but what we found is when the parts came back together, they could catch a leg or a wing between those moving parts. So what we did, and we've got a whole patent about it, is we put a V-shaped gap here. And what that means is the bees are bridging the top and bottom in a V of every cell with their wax, and that way when it moves and moves back, this is now broken, and at worst you could get a bee caught in its own wax, and the other bees will help it out over time. So I can confidently say we harm a lot less bees harvesting in this way compared to the conventional harvesting methods.
Thanks, Seeds. Now, Happy Hounds in Ireland, who tunes in every week, is just wondering, Cedar, what are your thoughts on treatment-free hives?
Okay, treatment-free hives is going for the Darwinism approach of survival of the fittest, and I am an organic beekeeper. I don't like to use synthetic chemicals, so when it comes to Varroa, there's quite a lot of discussion out there in a lot of circles whether to treat or not. Now, most people do treat because they want to keep their bees alive, and for me, I think it's really important in this first season to maintain some colonies, so you've got something to work with when it comes to deciding to use genetic selection. So a lot of good hives that actually have great genetics, in the first year or two when Varroa hits, it's so intense and so extreme, you'll likely lose some good genetics if you don't do anything about the Varroa. And we're seeing that. We're seeing people that had, 80 hives now have 5, going the treatment-free route. We're seeing people that really, having said that, we're also seeing people that are putting in a lot of effort and still losing quite a lot of hives. It's just really intense when Varroa first comes through. We've done pretty well here. We've lost a few, but we've kept most of our hives due to just really making sure we're managing both the hive beetle, which is what tends to take out hives in these humid areas. Now, managing the hive beetle, and you can do that treatment free by using the oil tray down the bottom here, putting some cooking oil in it. So that is a treatment-free way to manage hive beetles. You can also buy treatments for hive beetles like fipronil traps and so on if you want to. If you decide to go treatment-free with Varroa, the options are quite limited. You are probably, I think it's something like less than 10% of hives will naturally show the genetic traits in order to manage Varroa themselves. So going treatment-free, you'll be preparing yourself for that, but we are hoping in the long term genetics will prevail, and we are 70 years in to Varroa jumping from Apis cerana, the Asian honeybee, across to Apis mellifera. So it's not very long in the time scale of evolution. Now, humans are good at meddling in evolution and speeding up genetic traits that are favourable, so we can do that as beekeepers. But to me, I wouldn't go treatment-free in the first 2 years of Varroa, but after that, I think it's a great idea to be selectively breeding so you can have treatment-free beehives.
Thanks, Seeds. For our beekeepers in the US and on the other side of the world, what should they be doing to prepare for spring?
Okay, so in order to prepare for spring, the main thing is be prepared with your hive equipment. So when bees are available in your area, you're not caught out with no hive equipment to put your bees in. So that means getting your favourite hive. So this one's the Flowhive 2, and then putting on your favourite coat, whether you like a clear coat like this or a painted hive like this. Getting it all ready so that when bees are available, spring is just around the corner in the northern hemisphere. We're a couple of weeks out, and what you should find is bees will become available, the season will start booming, and it's time to put your bees in your hive. If you have all your equipment ready, you can hit the ground running with season in the northern hemisphere, and that way you can really capitalise on that springtime, which is one of the biggest flows during the year. It's a great one to have your bees well established and building up in.
So Simon is wondering, can you put a swarm back into the same hive if you had another brood box?
Yes, absolutely. So put a swarm back into the hive if you have another brood box.
Into the same hive, so maybe the hive that swarmed, maybe Simon's caught it, and can he put it back into the same hive?
Oh, okay, merge the two colonies.
Maybe, yeah.
So the thing with that is you're likely got two queens, one in the swarm, sometimes more, and one in the hive would have probably raised another one. So that's what they try and do. The swarm takes off, the hive behind raises another queen. So yes, you can, but I would recommend using the merging technique. Otherwise you might get a lot of fighting between the two colonies if they have already gotten used to the pheromones of their own queen. So you can put a couple of sheets of newspaper between one hive, and let's say if your hive was in this configuration and you had a brood box with the swarm you just caught, you could put it right on top. However, you're better off putting it down here and taking out the excluder. So you can then merge the two colonies together, and a couple of sheets of newspaper, poke some holes for ventilation. The bees will slowly chew that away, and it'll be a slower merge and less fighting between the colonies. And they will naturally bump off one of the queens then. So you don't have to do that bit. You can just merge the two colonies if you want to. Normally you just start another hive because it's really useful to have a second or third hive in your apiary. That way, if you lose a queen in one and they don't get it together to raise another, you can always get some resources or some eggs that are down cells. So take a frame with eggs down the cells and use it to prop up the other hive, and hopefully they'll raise a new queen again. So generally I would prefer to start more hives than merge them together, unless you've got a really weak hive.
Right. So if you've left your super on over winter and so the queen has gone up into the flow frames, the question is, do I need to hunt for her to put her back down before I put the queen excluder on, or will she just move on down?
So generally she will move down and lay down here. She likes to lay down the bottom usually. However, to be sure, all you need to do is shake all the bees down to the bottom and put your excluder back in place. That way the queen and all the other bees are shaken down, excluder back on, flow frames back on, and then you know the queen has to be down the bottom. So just for those that are trying to understand that question, it's common in the colder areas to remove the queen excluder, which is a grid between the brood box and the super. And then come springtime, we want to put it back in place so the queen can't get through the grid and she can't lay eggs in your flow frames. Some queens never will, and you can run without an excluder, but some queens will. So that's another thing you can muck around with. If you're keen on doing flow frame inspections, you might decide to run without an excluder at all. And I've had that running successfully a lot of times, but I've also had fails where the queen, for whatever reason, does like to lay in the flow frames. So it's quite queen specific. But to be on the safe side, shake all the bees out of the super, back down into the bottom box, put your excluder back on, super back on, and you've got it all set for the spring.
So it's got a couple of people in really cold climates, like we've got someone from Norway, and I'm not quite sure where the other person is tuning in from, but just wondering, how do these go in really extreme cold weather?
Okay, we do have hives in Norway, we have them in Nebraska, we have them in Alaska, and so extreme cold, the Flowhive does perform well. And the reason why is you're harvesting like this in the warmer months of the year. And what you'll find is there'll be big differences between how you treat your hive over winter compared to how we are here in the subtropics. But the honey season will be similar, where your hives will be filling up in the warmer months and you can harvest away. Now, if you are harvesting on colder days, particularly the edge frames, it will take a lot longer to come out. You can see we've been here 20 minutes and we have a nice full jar. The frame's completely been emptied. That's because we're here in the hot time of year. We've only just transitioned to autumn. We're pretty much a summer's day here. So the frames, they also have the brood nest below warming them, and you've also got a hot day, so the honey's flowing quite quickly. It will flow a bit slower on the edges of your hive in those cold climates, but you're not doing any work while it's draining out. You can go and do something else, and even if it takes an hour or two, you can still harvest those cold frames on the edge of your hive in those really cold climates. Wintering is another topic. In the extreme cold places, sometimes people actually send their brood nests away to be looked after by somebody who keeps the hives during that extreme cold season, and they get them back in the springtime. Very different to here, where we can just keep it in this configuration all year round.
Now, so, John's wondering, you put the key in and you put it in halfway, I think. His question is, why do you put the key in halfway and turn the frame and then go all the way to the end and turn it again, opposed to inserting it all the way at the first time and just turning it? John's wondering, is it easier? Is there any reason why you do that?
Simply because it's easier. So you'll find that some frames will be very firm to turn. They weren't today. I probably could have done these in one go, like that. But more often than not, it's actually quite hard to do the whole frame at once. So we recommend just doing it in a few segments, and that makes it easier to turn that key.
Fantastic. So just the treatment on this hive, you mentioned before that it's a Flowhive 2, a hoop pine. What is painting? Can you stain these hives, basically?
So the Western Red Cedar is an amazing wood, and the only one that you can really keep it looking like wood for the long term. Now we are experimenting with our new TGP and things are going well because we're trying to find a wood that compares to the properties of Western Red Cedar. But our Araucaria, our hoop pine, does need to be covered in or coated in a good outdoor house paint. So that's what we've done here. We've got out the artistics, or my niece has rather, and painted these beautiful kangaroo paws. So we've got kangaroo paws on kangaroo paws here. They're an iconic Australian flower, and that will keep that Araucaria looking good for the long term. Now, if you have the Western Red Cedar like this, you can then choose your favourite decking coats. Now, the deck coats are made to keep wood looking like wood, or raw wood, should I say, for the long term. So they're the ones you want to select for painting your hive if you want to keep it in this beautiful wood tones. But if you do that with Araucaria, you'll be disappointed and you'll get mildew under that coat. So you're better off using a good outdoor house paint on the Araucaria or hoop pine.
Great, and so it's just letting you know, Fred Dunn's just tuned in, so he has not been tuning in for a while. He's been a very busy bee, and he's just mentioned that his Flowhives just came through a really brutal winter with low temps and high wind conditions, all fine.
Oh, lovely.
Where is Fred?
He's right up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a very cold area. He's sent amazing photos of the snow building up on the Flowhive roofs, and it's just so different to here. It's hard for us to even imagine. But it's fantastic that we have a global community of people keeping bees in all those different climates. There was a question earlier about how they would go in Norway, and Fred Dunn would have some great advice on keeping Flowhives in those colder times. He's got a great YouTube channel. He also features as one of our experts on the beekeeper.org, which is an online course to take you from square one right through to a really deep knowledge in beekeeping. Gets rave reviews. Fred Dunn's one of our experts, helping you learn about what to do in those really cold climates with your Flowhive.
Patrick's tuning in from Florida and just wondering, is it rare to have a colony of bees find the Flowhive organically, or do you always have to buy a starter pack of bees?
Okay, what you're talking about is a bait hive. So yes, you can set up a brood box and hope that bees move into it, but you've only got a hope, and really you need to be near a whole lot of other hives in the springtime to get a successful bait hive where the bees move right in. So if you happen to be over the fence from a lot of hives and it's springtime, by all means try your hand at setting up a bait hive. You just do the brood box only, set it 6 to 12 feet off the ground. You can increase the chances by mucking around with putting some pheromone mimicking scents in there. Lemongrass oil works for that, in a little Ziploc bag. Poke some holes in it so it's got a slow release queen bee pheromone. Or you can even purchase a product called Swarm Commander, which people say is helpful for attracting bees or a swarm of bees to your bait hive. And you might get lucky, they might move right in, and you can start that way. It's a fun thing to do if you're keeping a lot of hives too. We always set up our bait hives in springtime, just in case we get a swarm, and we might get lucky and they move right in. I've actually found more often than not they move into the pile of beehives we've got around the back that are sitting there, a bunch of old boxes and things, and they'll choose that. So it's another way to go. If you've got some beehive equipment, put it around the back and try your luck at a swarm moving right in.
See, Anna's wondering, Anna's saying she's got a lot of work to do inside the hive and understands that the less you're in there the better, but she's got heaps of comb that she wants to cut out. So Anna's wondering, is it better to just take the frame out and close up the hive, or just keep the hive open, do her work and then close it all back up again?
Okay, so It's okay to inspect your hive as much as you want to. It's great learning, so don't be afraid to get in there often. There are some caveats on that, and that there's 2 times when you don't want to inspect, and one is if you've introduced a new queen to your hive, leave it a good week before you open it up. Otherwise, you may lessen the chances of the hive accepting that new queen. The other time is weather specific, so you're not opening up your hive when it's cold or rainy or windy. So below 15 degrees C, it's best not to start pulling the brood frames out, because the open larvae can suffer from cold shock. But other than that, get in there, learn as much as you can by inspecting as often as you like. It's fantastic and a great way to go, especially when the colony is small and it's just starting out. Get in there and watch it build. It's fascinating, and you'll really learn fast. You'll see things that you want to know the answers to. You'll find out the answer, and that's the whole idea, is you're learning as you go about what happens in the brood nest, how to look after them when things go awry, and if you look after the bees and you get a really healthy population, you've got lots of flowers, then you get these beautiful spoils of honey that you see here. Each one of these jars is a single frame, so it's amazing. It's just an incredible amount of honey. That's 3 kilograms of honey there, or probably slightly more, and that's from a single frame. It's hard to believe you even fit that in a single frame, but the bees just make an incredible amount of honey, because a hive like this could visit 50 million flowers in a day, and that's just an extraordinary, hard to believe number.
It sure is, Seeds. And why the different colours?
So we were talking earlier about one of the amazing benefits of a flow hive is harvesting honey frame by frame and making sure you're isolating those flavours. So if you're using a big jar like this, or you're harvesting the small jars, then you'll be just getting whatever's in that frame going into this jar. So if I taste the difference between these two, they've both got slightly different flavours. And sometimes you'll get a dark one. You can see here, this one's a darker honey than this one. And there's as many different flavours of honey as there are nectar producing flowers in the world. So you can't always tell what it is, because the bees have found something flowering somewhere and you can't work out what it is. But often on the bigger flowerings, you can really tell by looking at the colour, by looking at the flavour and the aroma, and really connect the dots between what honey it is and what's been flowering. So the short answer is you get the different colours and different flavours depending on what flowers the bees were visiting.
Seeds, if you just want a flow hive in your backyard, do you need any licences or permits, or do you have to register hives?
Yes, so in most jurisdictions, including Australia here, you need to register your hive, and there's a token amount of money to do that, which just helps, in our case in New South Wales, the DPI to maintain good practices throughout the country to benefit the honeybees. So the idea is the service is available to you. You can send away slides of broods you're unsure about and get free testing for AFB or other things like that. So registering your hives is a requirement here in Australia, and it also helps the DPI know where all of the hives are in the case of an outbreak like we had with Varroa, and it's an important part of the whole thing is to register. There's also some educational material that will come through with that, and important notifications for your area. Some jurisdictions in the world don't require that, so just do a little research and see whether you need to register your hives. And for us, we get a hive number to write on every hive, which also helps to track, let's say, if you have the unfortunate event of a stolen hive. If you're numbering your equipment, it can be traced back to you as your registered number as a beekeeper.
So how can you tell the difference between real honey and fake honey?
Okay, it can be hard, but the main difference is the sugar profile. So for people that are really trying to tell the difference between adulterated honey, which is where honey producers have mixed corn syrup or sugar syrup, then they'll be looking at the specifics between flowering species. Corn syrup and sugarcane are both part of the grass family and have a different sugar profile. So it's not easy for you to tell as a consumer, but scientifically you can tell the difference, and companies, quite big companies, have been caught out adulterating and selling honey and claiming it's pure, authentic honey. So a lot of that happens in the world, unfortunately. So one of the great ways is to harvest honey directly from your hive, or get honey from your local beekeepers rather than buying it in the supermarket.
Great. So now a couple of people asking, whereabouts are we located? Somebody's actually asking if we're in New Zealand.
Well, we're not too far from New Zealand, where Trace is from.
Yeah, so maybe they think that's why, because I'm talking.
And we're on the east coast of Australia, near a little town called Byron Bay. It's a very green area. We've had a lot of rain recently, and what happens when we get rain is it stimulates the flowers to flower, particularly in the autumn. We're already seeing the melaleuca, or the paperbark, starting to flower, and that's these tones here where you get the reddy brown tones and the beautiful burnt toffee-like flavour in the honey. So it's a great sort of year-round beekeeping season here, where you can harvest quite good honey during the winter time as well. And that's quite different to a lot of areas that have a more distinct season of a big honey flow through spring and summer, maybe a little bit in the fall, and then not much after that. So it's subtropical here, very green, wet, humid climate at the moment.
So I don't know if you can do this, but we've got a few people asking about our ideal boxes and wondering if you could talk a little bit about them and how to use them. Also, if you could show us one, but I don't know if we can, or if there's one floating around here somewhere. Or
there is. We could go and grab an ideal box from inside, and we'll see if Sophie can grab one of them for us. We'll come back to that question.
Oh, beauty. That'd be great.
So look at this. This jar is almost overflowing. And it's got quite fruity flavours compared to this one, which is more, what do you say, it's just got more warmer, deeper tones compared to this one. It's a beautiful thing to just taste honey and isolate the different flavours frame by frame. In fact, some clever beekeepers are doing really well marketing single frame honeys, and even going so far as saying which hive it came from and which frame in which hive it came from. And through that storytelling, they're able to get a much higher value for their honey, and a lot easier to harvest.
Yeah, that's like single origin coffee, and often people like to do that, don't they? So how many bees are in a hive?
So I would guess this hive's got about 30,000 bees. Actually, I'm not seeing that many in the window at the moment, so it might even have a little bit less. When a hive is pumping, you could have even 50,000 bees or more. And most of them are the worker bees, and usually just one queen, and then a handful, say 600 drones. So drones are the male bees. And that's a typical makeup of a hive. It does fluctuate during the season, but what you're looking at through the window, because we've got our excluder in place, the queen or the worker can't come up, so all of these are worker bees. And if you look beneath their feet, you can see the glistening nectar the bees are depositing right in the cells, which is exciting. Tells us there's a flow on at the moment. It's a good time to harvest a little honey. Okay, so getting back to the ideal question. So this is called an ideal, which is basically a shorter honey super or brood box, depending on how you use it. So Fred Dunn, who's tuned in, might even share a link on how he uses the ideals as instead of a queen excluder actually. In those colder areas, right up in Pennsylvania, he finds that this is the right amount of honey stored in this size box in the ideal. It's got little short frames like this. So imagine this was all full of honey and it was right on top of your brood box. He finds that that's enough honey to get the hive through the winter in that extreme cold of Pennsylvania. Now, also, if you have this on top of the brood box, it acts as a honey barrier, if you like, and the queen's very unlikely to come up and lay in your flow frames. So some people use this instead of the queen excluder. And some extra honey stores for the winter. So that's called the ideal. Other people, like Trace reading out the questions, she likes to use it as a honey collection or honeycomb collection box by putting it on top of the flow frames. So up here, when the bees need more space, they move up there, and they might make you some nice honeycomb in these cute little frames that'll look great on your cheese platter or taken to your next wedding and so on.
Yes, I just have to brag about that actually, because I took my ideal off a couple of weeks ago and it was chock-a-block. So I took all the honeycomb out, cut it out, gave it away, kept lots. And I checked it on the weekend, so 2 weeks after I'd taken off, it is already half full again of honeycomb. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's exciting when the season's really kicking.
Oh, it was just like, I thought, oh, it's going to be empty, I better check it, it's getting a bit cool, maybe the beetles. And it's half full already, so that was pretty exciting, I must say.
That's beautiful when you've really got a healthy colony of bees, lots of things flowering, and they go really quick, filling up frames of honey, whether it be for honeycomb or whether it be for harvesting honey with your flow frames.
Seeds, Kyla's got has a 10,000 square lot and a swimming pool, and just wondering any suggestions on where they should put their flow hive.
Okay, 10,000 square lot and a swimming pool. So it's very common to keep bees in suburbia and in small backyards, even in balconies, in high rises and so on. So situating your hive, there'll be a bit of a hierarchy of ideals, I guess. So the first one for a backyard will be the flight path of the bees. You notice all the entrances are pointing out where people aren't walking. If we had the hives facing the other way, then anyone walking past here might get bees in their hair accidentally, stings on the head and so on. And they're also more protective of their hive on the entrance side. So situate your hive so the bees can get up and away without bothering anybody. So you want maybe 2 or 3 good clear meters that way, and then they're up and away, and that's probably the primary thing to think about. The next one is perhaps pets. Now, some people like to fence their hive off from their fluffies that want to get around and stick their nose in the entrance. Others just like to let them learn, and they often learn quite quickly not to do that, and they get a sting on the nose. Others, the next thing to think about is sun or shade, and that's one we get often. Now you'll notice that commercial beekeepers are keeping their hives out in paddocks in the full sun, and that's for a reason. Sun helps keep away pathogens like chalk brood, which is a fungus that can get into your brood nest. The nice sun beaming down on your hive helps dry things out, and it's less likely to get that one. So full sun is better than full shade. However, if you had the ideal, you'd get afternoon shade in summer, just so your bees aren't working so hard to cool the hive. But if you've got a choice between full sun or full shade, always go full sun, like we have here. You also get less hive beetles in your hive in full sun as well.
Seeds, what do you reckon the top 3 flowers would be in Australia that the bees like?
Okay, that's a hard one to answer. bees will go for nectar producing flowers. Now you do get flowers that will produce, well, that are all show no flow, we say, where they look beautiful but there's just no nectar in them. And that can be specific to location as well, like the brush box trees here we get nothing from. They just flower beautifully, no nectar. You go inland, quite a lot of nectar, same species. So what do the bees like best? That's a hard one to answer. Anything that's producing good nectar locally within, say, a 3 kilometre radius or 2 miles from their hive, the bees will love. Now, in Australia we've got iconic flavours like the eucalypts, blue gum for instance, yellow box, all of the eucalypt species are very iconic Australian flavours, and the bees will go crazy for those trees when they're flowering. Now I'm going to show you how to turn off the honey flow here. This jar is getting really quite full, so I'm going to take this key out. I'm going to put it in the top slot here, and I'm going to turn it, making sure it goes all the way to the back. It's easy to turn when you close it. Leave it there for a minute or two as you pack up that frame. So I'm going to do the hot swap, where I just take out that tube. I'm going to leave the rest of the remaining trickle of honey to go back into the hive for the bees. The bees are good at cleaning up a bit of honey that dribbles inside the hive. Yum. That's good honey.
I say, does the queen ever escape?
Well, they say the queen can't fly when she's in egg laying mode, but I've certainly seen that she can. You might be playing with the queen and she just takes off and you're like, the queen's run, flown away, and you're chasing her across the yard. So yes, she can, but that's in the case where you are disturbing the hive. The only time she leaves the hive once she's in that egg laying mode is if the hive swarms, which is the natural division where the hive's too crowded. Half the bees will kick out the old queen. They'll starve her first so she's nice and lightweight to fly, and then they'll kick her out and off they go to find a new location to set up shop, and that's the natural way hives divide. But generally she doesn't just fly off. It's more likely that she gets bumped off by the hive because she's not performing good enough, or she gets accidentally squashed, or disappears for some unknown reason.
Maya says that they have to take off the flow frames in winter time because they get snow, and just wondering what's the best way to clean it and store it through the winter.
Okay, so you're taking off this box for the winter time, you're packing it down to a smaller sized hive, and in doing so you're giving the bees a more manageable amount of space to keep warm during the winter. That's a typical thing to do, and in those colder climates it's typical to have perhaps more than one brood box, so you might just take the flow super off and reduce it to either a single brood box or a double brood box or a single brood box and an ideal of honey like this box here. And that'll be enough for them to go through the winter time. And in order to store the flow hive or the flow frames in the flow super, we'll take that box off, we're shaking all the bees out, and if the bees have cleaned them up, as in you've harvested and the bees have licked the remaining honey and they're all dry, there's no honey in it, you can just store that in a cool place away from wax moth and vermin, say in a sealed tub, and they'll be ready to go next spring. But if you find that there is some honey or nectar in there and you want to preserve that, then what you can do is put that in a freezer, and it will just keep it as it is till next spring when you can put it back on again. So if you've got a freezer available, that's probably the best way to keep that hive as it is, ready to go back on the hive in the next time when the bees are ready for it. So if you don't have freezer space and you've got just a bit of honey or nectar left in the frames, you can choose to harvest it, or you can choose to just wash it out, let the frames dry in the shade, and then put them away in a cool dark area, ready to go back on the hives in the springtime.
So is the dark honey sweeter?
The dark honey typically has the more malty tones, like the deeper tones, where you've got less of those high floral bursts. Now that's what we find in this area, but every flowering species is unique. We just find like you've got those more, what would you say, warmer toffee-like flavours in the dark one. Sometimes aniseed or licorice type flavours, there's a honey that comes in, it's almost completely black and it's got a licorice type flavour to it, which is incredible. Whereas the lighter ones have these floral bursts. Now, citrus honey is amazing, it's very fragrant. We've got lots of rainforest species here that flower in the springtime. We've even got the weeds, the understories like the privets here, which produce very light, very floral honey as well. So it's not always the colour depicting a flavour profile. Sometimes you won't know till you taste it.
Now there's a few questions going on here about ant cedar, and Fred's tuning in as well, saying a few people saying are ants a problem, and Fred sort of noticed like that this one I think has got ant caps, but he's also mentioned that the gardener needs to do a bit of a prune and it looks like the bees are probably climbing on those plants.
Yes.
So the ant guards at the moment are probably doing a battle, I imagine, with those ants.
So what happened today is when I took off this little cover, you can see it here, there was an ant's nest behind it. So what I did is I took out all the little caps that had the ants and eggs and I put them over there. And I got a lot of them off, but now they're a bit confused and they're wandering around. They're not really a problem for the bees. In some areas of the world there are species of ants that are a problem for the bees, but generally they're not a problem for the bees, they're just a cosmetic issue. So if you don't want them nesting behind these covers, what you do is you take them off, you brush all the ants away, and as you say, if you want the ant guards to work, you'll need to do some pruning of the garden, keep it nice and neat around the feet of your hive. If you have a look at this hive here, you can see the ant guard there. Now, it's not going to work if the foliage is bridging like that. The ants will just take a bypass around your ant guard. But if you find the ants are getting annoying, then brush them out from under the roof, behind the windows, behind the key access cover. Fill up these little ant guards with some grease or Vaseline, and that way the ants will have a barrier they can't walk across. And if you clear all the foliage and do that a couple of times, the ant problem will go away. Till next time.
Oh, great. So we've got one of our beekeepers, they've got a lot of honey seeping out through the bottom of the frame, so coming out of the flow frames and into the little channel. They haven't actually harvested yet, and the bees are still filling up their frames, so they're getting a little bit in the channel. Is that okay? But the bees are filling up the rest of the frames. So.
Okay, yeah. It's actually quite normal to see a bit of honey building up in the actual flow frame trough areas. Now let's see if we've got an example of it. Okay, these are all pretty clear, tiny bit on this frame. So what can happen is the bees, for whatever reason, they don't seal up all the frame parts as good as they could, and you get a little bit of nectar dripping through while they're producing and finishing filling up the frame. So what we did is we created a little leak back point. You can see it here if I take this frame out. There's a gap between the yellow part and the clear part, and that's for the bees' tongues, and I can see them there already licking through looking for some honey. And that works quite nicely until the bees block it up. And then any honey that's in there after harvesting or happens to be dripping through can't go back to the bees, and it builds up like you see in this frame here. So what we're going to do is, first of all, you can just turn that cap around and see if that breaks the seal, and if it does, that honey will drain into the hive and the bees can lick that up. But if that doesn't, then there's a few things you can do. One is you can take that cap out, and maybe that's done it now. I can see right there that it's broken that little seal. You can also insert the tube you use for harvesting, and we've made it so it automatically unblocks that without you having to think about it. So each time you harvest, it clears that little point. Or you can just poke a little stick or the end of your flow key in there to unblock it from time to time. And that way you won't get that build up. If it's been in there a long time, then it could ferment, in which case you'll want to clean that out just with a thin dishcloth on your flow key, and you can wipe out the trough if it's gotten a bit fermenty and manky there. You can also, if there's a lot in there and it's gone fermented, you can drain that away prior to harvest. Generally, we don't have to do that, and you can just go ahead and harvest, but there's a few tricks there if the honey's been left in there for a long time and it's started to ferment. Okay.
Want to just do a little shout out. We've got a few people asking, do we ship to the country they're in, and if they want to buy multiple hives. Best thing for you is to contact our customer support. You can call or email info@honeyflow.com, and honeyflow.com is the sort of international site, and it will often direct you to where you should buy from. But if you can't see your country there, just contact the awesome customer support team, and they'll do their best to be able to ship your hive anywhere in the world. Seda, just this is a good one. Anna's put her got her brood frames, and she's maybe left a too big a gap between each brood frame, and now the bees have kind of built their comb a little bit winky wonky, and she's wondering, should she get in and cut it out, because she's worried that perhaps that space now may create room for the hive beetle.
Okay, it's not so much room for the hive beetle, it's just keeping the frames organised so that you can do your inspections. Now, if you've gone and accidentally left too much space between the frames, we always recommend pushing them together so the spacing's right, and you're much less likely to get wonky comb if you're allowing the bees to draw it naturally themselves. So what you can do, like let's assume that this is a box with frames of naturally drawn comb. You've left a little space like that, and they've started to build another sheet of comb between these two, or perhaps it's just right off the comb guide. So you just have to approach it practically. Now if it's just honey, you can simply just cut that out and enjoy the honeycomb and give them another go at building on the comb guide. If there's brood in it, then what you'll need to do, if it's really wonky, is cut that section of brood out and use some rubber bands to go around the frame like that and hold it in place temporarily while they connect it to the surrounding frame. More often than not, all you need to do is get your hive tool and tweak the bit that's wandering offline back onto the comb guide. That's a quite quick operation, and you put the frame back in. Now sometimes you might decide that changing the order will just help them organise that part of the frame into a nice straight line. Once they've got it nice and straight, it'll be good serviceable comb for a long time in your hive. Now, if you are moving frames around, just make sure you're not pressing comb against comb. Otherwise, hive beetles, as you were saying earlier, it's not so much of having too much space hive beetles will get into. It's when there's not enough space for the bees to service. So let's say you move some frames around, or for whatever reason you squash them up close together and there's comb pressing against comb like that. The bees will have to chew away that wax to get it serviceable again so they can get into that region. But in the meantime, if you've got bad hive beetles in your area, they could take advantage of laying thousands of eggs in that region where the bees can't get to them. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so in terms of other bees, like native bees or different types of honeybees, how do they all live together, and can you sort of have mixtures of all types of bees in your garden?
You certainly can. So I've got the native sugarbag bees here, which is the Tetragonula carbonaria, I've got those species at home, as well as lots of Apis mellifera, the European honeybee. You see them coexisting just fine. I've never seen European honeybees trying to steal honey from the sugar bag bees, but I have seen it the other way around, where you might see the native bee species coming and getting a little honey that might be left here on this strip or something like that. As far as in the flowers, I've got plenty of footage of them sharing flowers together, where you've got Tetragonula carbonaria, the little black native bee, and European honeybees all in the same flower together. They don't tend to fight for resources.
Now, Sid, I think I know the answer to this one. Vena's just got her hive. It's his second Flowhive 2+. But you know, the little spring that goes on the back of the door on the little latch, she's got 2 springs and was just wondering, is there a second spring that goes somewhere? But I don't think there is. I think it's just an extra spring she's got.
Yes, you'll find there's 2 in every pack as a spare, because they're such little ones, we didn't want you to lose your spring.
Oh, so one doesn't go behind the latch, does it?
No,
no.
It's just a single spring on the outside will do. You see a lot of people just put 2, that's totally fine as well, but we just simply gave you a spare, just as we give you a spare screw for each box build as well. We don't want you in an issue where you're one short.
Okay, have to get you back into fault seeds. Question, setting up your Flowhive, how many months or weeks does it generally take to start harvesting, being able to harvest honey?
Okay, that's the $1 million question.
Yes.
So, like a lot of things in beekeeping, the answer really varies. So in the extreme case, we get people that will set up a hive in the middle of a booming spring, and 3 weeks later their box is full and ready to harvest. They harvest all the honey like we're doing here. Then a week or 2 later it's full again, they harvest it again, and it's just unbelievable. However, you can also get seasons where you don't get any honey at all. Perhaps the flowers didn't flower, perhaps your colony didn't have enough bees to create excess honey for you to share as well. And there's a lot of different things that will go into that dynamic, but basically the recipe for a lot of stores or excess stores of honey that you can share in is a booming colony. So when you look in the windows, there's lots of bees and a lot of flowers around. But if those 2 things don't coincide, you might find you may not get honey, or it might take a long time. But typically, on average, in this area, you'll be waiting some months before you get honey stores. Now, that depending on the time of year. And if we were to say an average, we would say, well, we could harvest all of these frames a couple of times a year, which would give you 14 of these jars of honey from a single hive. Other beekeepers boast they can get a full drum, this big, 200 litres of honey from a single beehive. But that's beekeepers that are relying on that as an income, and they'll be moving their hives to big booms or big blooms in flowering to make sure they get a lot of honey in their season. So here in this location, maybe harvesting each frame twice is average.
Right, and Seeds, any tips on encouraging the bees to start using the flow frames?
Yes, so if you want to speed up the process of the bees naturalising the flow frames, let's have a look here. I've got a frame, and this is a frame that has no wax on it. It's only got a little grasshopper on it. And what will happen is you put that in, and if the bees don't need the extra space, then they just simply won't use it until the numbers of bees build up and there is a lot of flowers in your area, and then they'll go, we need the extra space. They'll wax these up, they'll naturalise it, they'll cover all of the cells in wax, they'll start depositing their nectar, and the whole process of storing honey in the flow frame starts. However, if you're getting impatient, or perhaps you've got a really short season you want to capitalise on, really want to make sure, you can use some beeswax to speed up the process. Now the easiest way to do that, I think, is you scrape some off the top of the brood frames. If they are ready for a super, they're probably starting to build a little bit of comb on top of the brood frames. So in this case, let's pretend this was your brood frames here. You'll be scraping a bit of that wax off. You're after the wax, not the honey. It doesn't matter if you get the honey too, but it's the wax that counts. So you're scraping that off, and you can just mash it into the surface of the flow frame like that. You won't damage the flow frame. There'll be big blobs of wax there. Put it on the window side. Enjoy watching them recycle and use that wax to coat the flow frame parts, and that will start the process on that area of the frame. However, you still won't get honey stores until you've got a lot of bees in your hive and a lot of flowers producing nectar in your area. Some people like to paint wax on. Now, if you're doing that, please don't pour beeswax into the flow frames like this. You'll jam the mechanism. But you could, if you wanted to, warm up some beeswax and paint it on to the flow frame surface, just lightly like that. And that's another way you could speed up the process of the bees naturalizing the flow frames.
Seeds, are the frames reusable after using them? So once you've harvested honey, do you just keep using the same frames?
Yes, absolutely. We want them to last many, many seasons. We've got beekeepers out there with our original 2015 flow frames, now 11 years in and still going strong. And that's what we've designed them for, and that's what we hope they'll do for you as well. We find after 5 years it's a good idea to give them a good clean, take them out of the hive, use a pressure washer to blast some of the old wax away, give them a new lease in life. Please don't throw them away when they're really old and waxy. Clean them up, let them dry in the shade, get them back onto the hive so they can keep giving you a really good, useful service like this, bypassing the whole conventional extracting room that you once needed for harvesting honey.
Seeds, we're obviously getting a few US customers now who are receiving their thermograde, the new timber, the thermograde Flowhive, but sort of having questions on how to paint it. Can you oil it? Can you stain it?
Yes, that's a great question. Now, the thermograde is actually this wood here. It's very lightweight. We've designed it to compete with the properties of Western red cedar. For years, we've been working away at how we can get a wood type that can compete with those properties. Now, while we still say Western red cedar is the ant's pants, it's the bee's knees, it's the best you can get in terms of wood properties for a long-lasting beehive wood. The thermograde looks like it's coming close. Now, what we're saying at the moment is use a good outdoor house paint to put on it to give it its longest lasting benefits. However, we are experimenting, and we have been for a while now, with coats that may compete with this look in the Western red cedar. But you're on your own, but would really like your feedback if you do tend to use the decking coats on the thermograde. Right now we're saying good outdoor house paint, but if you want to experiment, you're welcome to. And we are finding quite good results so far. Probably not quite as good as the Western red cedar, but close in terms of using a decking coat on the exterior of the hive.
Seeds, when you first install a nuke into your hive, do you need to feed them?
So that depends on where you are, and perhaps when you get your nuke off the bee breeder, you might ask what the climate's like. Do you need to feed your bees in order to build them up? In the springtime, there's often so many flowers everywhere, you don't need to feed them. But if you are in an area which really doesn't have many flowers yet, and you've got a nuke that's very light, there's no honey stores in there, then they will benefit from feeding some sugar syrup or dry sugar.
Fantastic, Seeds. What do you prefer to use as a flow hive, the 6 or the 7, and why would you choose one over the other?
So here it doesn't matter a great deal. I used to always say I preferred the 6, which corresponds to the 8 frame Langstroth size. It's a bit smaller and a bit easier to lift the boxes, but now we have the super lifter, which makes it very easy to lift off those heavy honey supers it no longer matters whether it's on the smaller size or the larger size. In the colder regions, it's almost always preferred to use the larger size, which in our case is called the Flow 7, corresponds with a 10 frame Langstroth size box. And the reason is you just get a couple more brood frames in there, which often end up as storage of honey on the edges of the brood nest, which is useful in those colder climates. So colder regions, larger size. The rest of the world probably doesn't matter which size you go for.
Great, C's. Let's just got a question on the plastics on the flow frames and microplastics, and what type of plastics we use in the flow frames.
Okay, so the flow frame, what we've done is we've chosen a very stable plastic. So this is polypropylene, one of the most widely used food grade plastics because it's so stable. In fact, if people are storing chemicals in plastic, polypropylene is the one they'll use because it's so stable. And we wanted that stability in order to really make sure we had a long-lasting product and also the least likely to have any migration into our honey. So another thing that is really neat with a flow hive is the bees cover all the parts in wax. So if you look here, you can see all of these cells are getting really waxy, and this one's been used for many seasons, this one's just a couple of seasons, and you can see the wax build up. So if you like, the nectar and honey is being put inside a waxed coated cell within the substrate of our flow frame. So plastic isn't new to beekeeping at all. In fact, some people use a lot of plastic foundations in their hive throughout, or they even use fully drawn plastic comb for the bees to store their honey in. What we've done is come along and say, let's make it a food grade, a highly durable plastic that's good for stability. And you can't say that for other beekeeping products. Often they're choosing plastics that aren't even a food grade plastic. So we've gone and made it a very stable food grade plastic, and the bees cover it in wax, which is a good thing because your honey is still sitting inside a little wax pocket within each cell.
So here's maybe a good one to end on. It's about getting your hive ready for winter. So I think Simon must be on this side of the world. He's just wondering if, as he harvests each frame, could he just take one frame out at a time and store it for winter, or is it best to take the whole lot off at once?
So generally when you're packing down your hive for winter, if you've got a long cold winter ahead, then what you'll be doing is you're taking the frames out, you're shaking the bees off. Often they're not even up in that super anymore because they're starting to shrink their colony down, and you're taking all the frames out at once, shaking all your bees off. You can put them back into the super and use that box to hold them while you store them away for the winter time. Now, if there's still honey left in them, you can store them in a deep freeze, and that will keep that honey good for when you put that box back on the hive again in the spring. If you want to, you can harvest all the honey, let the bees clean up the frames, put them away for the winter if you don't have a deep freeze. If you find that there's a little bit of nectar in your frames and you've left them over the winter time and it's gone a bit fermented, then you'll need to wash that out with a hose or a pressure washer. Let them dry in the shade and put them back on the hive in the springtime. Now I'm going to pack up this last frame simply by moving this key over here in the top slot, turning it to a 90. I'll leave it there for a minute or two. That's a good tip, making sure all of the flow frame parts go back into position. Now I could leave it here and collect a little bit more honey, but in this case I'm just going to hot swap the tube here for the cap, and now I can either enjoy those spoils or you can rest it on a jar for the remaining bit to go back. And there you have a beautiful jar of honey ready for the table, and it's just incredible how much honey you can get out of a single frame, and amazing to isolate all the different flavours of the season like you see here, with this beautiful array of different colours all coming in from these hives right here, from all of the different things that are flowering. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, best of luck with your season ahead. Now's the time to really get your beekeeping equipment ready, and in lieu of installing your bees while the flowers are really flowering. Let us know what the season is like in your area in the comments below. It's amazing to have a global beekeeping community helping each other through all of the different things in beekeeping, and huge thank you to those that are chiming in and helping answer questions in the thread. Same time next week. See you then for another live Q&A.